Well, morning everyone. Let's move to the next topic. First of all, thank you to Andreas and all the team because the organization another year is amazing. The places chosen are really, really fascinating, and it's the right environment to talk about the hot topics we are discussing in our daily basis. So the next topic is about innovation to create added value through data. It's important to collect data, but even more important is what we can do with all this data and how we can move forward in order to approach or do a closer approach between the brands and the consumers. So we have here two excellent speakers. We have Aniz Ruda, it's VP Analytics for Weber Sandwich. Weber Sandwich is one of the largest communication agencies around the world. And we have also Christian Sauer, which is the CEO of WebTrek. WebTrek is an intelligence-based platform that combines any source of data just to create people-based experiences for brands. So, to this topic, we are going to discuss in two perspectives. One is what we can do in the present, what we can do right now, and another one is the view of what will be possible to do in the future. So, I have to say welcome to Aniz.
All right, so I'm going to start by talking about mining for stories from open source data. The smart cities was a really good segue for what I'm going to talk about today. It's a little more of the application side of things with respect to data that's publicly available. Some of the key learnings, I'll talk through some of the approach that we developed when we were mining a lot of this public data, and then just trying to tell a story through disparate sets of data, and I'll walk through a case study with actually the city of Chicago. In our case, at Weber Shandwick, we're really focused on the storytelling part of data, and that's how we're using it every day. So we're always looking for different applications, different ways to really communicate stories that are relevant to our clients, relevant to our brands, and that really have a hook into marketing that are culturally relevant. So our client, the city of Chicago, they launched their open data portal a few years back. And we were right there with them, really trying to get the media coverage within the local media, but then also national as well. There's been a big movement for a lot of cities to get into the open data space. If data is the currency of the future, then all these cities are trying to cash in. So the city of Chicago launched their Open Grid project, and now it's really going into the array of things or Internet of Things, working with sensor data. So what we did, we worked with their APIs to really get an understanding of what actually exists. We started with context. We wanted to establish that cultural relevance of what matters to people in the city. So for those of you that don't know anything about Chicago, you might know our president says it's more dangerous than Afghanistan. So that's not really the case. Some areas are better than others, like every city. But for us, there's health concerns that affect us every day. There is crime, weather. All of this data is starting to become more and more public. And then people are starting to develop applications that sit on top of it. And we're really looking for those patterns. So for us, we really wanted to understand what's that context, what's culturally relevant, what are people talking about every day. That informed our discovery phase. So the discovery phase, for those of you that have mined open APIs, and open data sources, it can take forever. It's a laborious process. So my analyst and I sat down and we really wanted to focus on what could we tell, what kind of story could be developed from the data that's available to really keep us focused on what's relevant, what's important. From there, we wanted to figure out what are the gaps. So once we really tried to articulate what that story is going to be, we wanted to find what other data sets can we match to really bring this to life. So I'll walk through the example that we actually came up with through our plan and outline. So we wanted to plan the story, plan our narrative, plan the context around what we wanted to present. And then lastly, we started to go through our analysis and our build. So let's talk about sex. What does sex have to do with creating value from data? It's a pretty big leading question. What we found was the cleanest data available from the city of Chicago was actually sexually transmitted disease data. So what ended up happening was that it was very structured, it was available for a long period of time, and it was regionalized. So we can tell within the zip codes of the city of Chicago which rates of sexually transmitted diseases were higher than others. We could also tell how it compared to the city or the entire country. So we found that in some areas that you can see here, so the pins represent the STD rate or the occurrence of STDs in the city. And then the red is actually a high rate, green is low, yellow is in the middle. For the red ones, we found that the average is 3 times higher than the rest of the United States. So we started to bring in national level data to really articulate what that story is. And the color coding, this is all by zip code. We wanted to really tell or bring home that socioeconomic story that's connected with healthcare and that's connected with public health. So we started to highlight through this heat map the low-income areas around the city of Chicago. So that's where our story started to emerge. We started to see that low-income areas also had a high rate of STDs. And at first we were thinking, what could that possibly mean? And what could that possibly tell us? So once we started mining, we looked at public health access. So there's condom distribution centers that we mapped over it. And if you know anything about the city of Chicago, the areas that are red and that have a red dot are also the lowest income areas. They're the highest crime areas. They're the ones where people have the lowest access to education. So now we're starting to really make sense of the data, and we're starting to articulate, you know, what is actually happening, what can we do about it, and then who would find this valuable? So I think we're really telling a richer story with the information, and we're finding some practical applications. So some of the things that we learned, you know, we wanted to articulate the problem we solved, explore our possibilities, look for other connections. I mean, this is just a starting point. It's kind of the tip of the spear. We can start to really layer and build more information and more data sets on top of this. And lastly, we wanted to keep an open mind. Honestly, when my analyst came to me and said, hey, the sexually transmitted disease data is the best available, I scoffed at her at first because I thought there's probably a lot of other things that we can be mining. Crime is such a big issue in the city. You know, pothole analysis is pretty hot on people's minds, as mundane as it sounds. So there's always an opportunity to go through and really get an understanding of what else is available. So future-proofing and kind of a segue into the next presentation, just really getting an understanding of the highlights and the challenges, blending additional city data, and predicting health outcomes. These are the things that we can start doing with this. Thank you.